Je suis Stéphane Bourgoin et nous préparons une nouvelle édition 100% inédite du nouvel almanach du crime et des faits divers. Et nous allons vous parler de ces fameux tueurs en série, ou suivant le terme anglo-saxon, de ces serial killers. Le mot serial killer est une invention relativement récente, qui date des années 70 d'un agent du FBI, mais sinon le concept de tueur en série, ou ce qu'on appelait autrefois au début du XXe siècle, au XIXe siècle, des tueurs fous, c'est quelque chose qui a toujours existé à toutes les époques de l'histoire. On peut imaginer par exemple que Caligula, Néron étaient déjà des tueurs en série. Gilles de Rais, qui a combattu aux côtés de Jeanne d'Arc, était un célèbre serial killer français qui a tué plusieurs centaines d'enfants pour des raisons pédophiliques et sataniques. On a eu Vacher, le tueur de bergers et éventreur de bergères, illustré au cinéma avec Galabru et Philippe Noiret dans le film de Bertrand Tavernier, Le juge et l'assassin. Mais véritablement, on commence à étudier ces serial killers au début des années 70. Alors, le tueur en série, c'est quelqu'un qui va commettre plusieurs crimes. Selon la définition du FBI, pour être labellisé serial killer, il faut avoir tué 3 victimes avec un certain intervalle de temps entre chacun des crimes. Moi, j'y ajouterais aussi une dimension d'ordre psychologique qui peut quelquefois avoir aussi un autre mobile. On peut avoir par exemple un Landru qui tuait après la Première Guerre mondiale en France des veuves et des divorcés, à la fois pour un motif sexuel et aussi pour un mobile crapuleux, c'était pour dévaliser des veuves et des divorcés, ou par exemple le tueur de l'Est parisien, Guy Georges, qui à la fois violait et égorgeait ses victimes, mais qui en même temps prenait une caméra, un Walkman pour les revendre. Donc il y a aussi cette dimension crapuleuse qui peut quelquefois intervenir. Et le tueur en série est très très différent par exemple d'un tueur comme Richard Durn qui a massacré un grand nombre de victimes également à Nanterre lors du conseil municipal. C'est ce qu'on appelle le tueur de masse, qui généralement lui souffre d'antécédents psychiatriques et qui va tuer un grand nombre de personnes mais dans un intervalle de temps très court et qui généralement va vouloir se suicider ou qui se fait arrêter sur la scène de ses forfaits, ce qui n'est pas du tout le cas du tueur en série. Dans plus de 95% des cas, ils ne souffrent pas d'antécédents psychiatriques, ils sont responsables de leurs actes et ils ne cherchent pas à se faire prendre. Au départ, rien ne me prédisposait à m'intéresser au sujet des tueurs en série. C'est parce que l'un d'entre eux s'est immiscé dans ma vie personnelle en 1976. À l'époque, je vivais à Los Angeles, je travaillais dans le domaine des séries B, petits films d'horreur, petits films polars, petits films érotiques. Et ma compagne a été violée et assassinée pendant que j'étais en déplacement à San Francisco. Et lorsque je suis revenu à Los Angeles, j'ai découvert son corps mutilé, violé et quasiment décapité. J'ai appris 2 ans après les faits, en 1978, alors que l'enquête piétinait. Je reçois un appel d'un détective du Los Angeles Police Department qui m'apprend que l'assassin a été arrêté et qu'il a avoué également une dizaine d'autres forfaits commis à travers tout le territoire américain. En tant que partie civile, j'ai eu droit et j'ai eu accès aux aveux de ce tueur. Et quelque chose à ce moment-là me frappe beaucoup. Je dirais que c'est presque un second choc qui intervient 2 ans après les faits. C'est qu'il n'y a pas de mobile reconnu dans ces aveux. Et le policier qui m'avait transmis ces documents est lui également extrêmement surpris parce que c'est quelque chose qu'il ne connaît pas. Dans la plupart des cas, on a toujours un mobile reconnu. L'endroit le plus dangereux pour tous les homicides en général, c'est toujours le domicile familial ou l'entourage proche. Or, dans ce cas précis, l'assassin et toutes ses victimes ne se connaissaient pas. Donc j'ai cherché à obtenir un certain nombre de réponses que je ne trouvais pas dans cette enquête, dans les aveux du tueur. Je suis ensuite allé dans différentes bibliothèques, que ce soit l'Institut de criminologie, lors d'un retour aux États-Unis, la librairie du Congrès, la plus grande librairie de psychologie, de psychiatrie au monde, qui est à l'université à Stanford, en Californie. Et je n'ai trouvé absolument aucun ouvrage, aucun article de fond sur ces criminels multirécidivistes, ces fameux serial killers dont le mot restait encore à inventer. Nous sommes alors en 1978. À l'époque, j'ai une librairie spécialisée en romans policiers qui s'appelle Le Troisième Œil, qui est la première à être spécialisée en polar en France. Et je traduis également des romans policiers, notamment d'un auteur très célèbre qui est Robert Bloch, dont le roman le plus fameux, Psychose, a été adapté par Alfred Hitchcock. Il écrit depuis la fin des années 30, et parmi ses plus grands fans, il y a des patrons de police, de brigades criminelles, de San Francisco, de Sacramento, de Los Angeles. Et quand je lui parle de ce qui m'est arrivé, des réponses que je cherche comme une sorte de catharsis et d'exorcisme personnel, il décide de me présenter à tous ses amis policiers qui étaient des fans de ses écrits. Et lors de repas chez lui, je noue des liens d'amitié avec ces policiers. Ils me permettent de venir les suivre sur des enquêtes, d'assister à des interrogatoires avec des criminels sexuels, puis d'avoir accès à des dossiers d'affaires qu'ils ont déjà traités. Et ensuite, ils me proposent, fin 78, de venir les accompagner pour rencontrer des tueurs dont ils avaient recueilli les aveux. À partir de 1979, je rencontre mon premier serial killer qui était Richard Chase, surnommé le vampire de Sacramento. Lui, contrairement à la plupart des tueurs en série, souffrait d'antécédents psychiatriques. Il était authentiquement psychotique et il n'aurait d'ailleurs jamais dû être condamné à mort. Il entendait des voix dans sa tête qui lui disaient que tous les gens de son voisinage étaient des nazis. Depuis son plus jeune âge, il massacrait des animaux, des chiens, des chats, des vaches, pour en extraire le sang qu'il buvait à même la gorge des animaux. Puis par la suite, sa psychose s'est encore accentuée, sa schizophrénie, et il s'est mis à s'attaquer à des êtres humains, des femmes enceintes, des bébés. Il prélevait le sang avec des pots de yaourt, les viscères qu'il ramenait chez lui pour ensuite les mélanger dans un mixeur avec du Coca-Cola et il se nourrissait ainsi. Il s'injectait aussi du sang de lapin dans les veines et la nuit, il dormait avec des oranges autour de sa tête, soi-disant pour stabiliser ses organes internes qui bougeaient sans cesse, pour que les vitamines C rentrent dans son cerveau. Curieusement d'ailleurs, un romancier de la série noire qui maintenant publie chez Albin Michel, Maurice Dantec, m'avait demandé à l'époque d'utiliser mon entretien avec Richard Chase pour son personnage de vampire dans son fameux ouvrage Les Racines du Mal. Cette premier entretien avec un tueur en série a été extrêmement difficile parce qu'il était véritablement psychotique. Il restait quelquefois 10 minutes ou un quart d'heure à me fixer droit dans les yeux sans parler, ce qui était relativement déstabilisant, surtout dans le contexte de la prison de Saint-Quentin où je me trouvais à l'époque. Et lorsque se terminent ces entretiens avec Richard Chase, il m'explique qu'il va finir par se suicider pour revenir se venger de tous ceux qui lui ont fait du mal sous la forme d'un vampire. Et effectivement, quelques mois plus tard, il se suicide en prison mais apparemment il n'est pas encore revenu à ce jour. Cette première rencontre avec un tueur en série, Richard Chase, le vampire de Sacramento, a été très déstabilisante. Tout d'abord, je n'avais pas l'expérience de ce type d'entretien et je m'étais forgé dans la tête un peu des images mentales qui étaient un peu héritées du cinéma, de films tels que M le Maudit, tels que Psychose et tout. Et en quelque sorte, Richard Chase, effectivement, ressemblait un peu à l'imagerie du tueur fou qui est véhiculée par le cinéma, qui est tout à fait contraire d'ailleurs à ce que j'ai l'habitude de rencontrer depuis sur la majorité des tueurs en série que je rencontre. Le fait aussi qu'il reste comme ça 10 minutes, un quart d'heure sans parler, à me fixer droit dans les yeux, me déstabilisait profondément. Et c'est un des entretiens les plus durs que j'ai eu à effectuer. Fort heureusement, depuis, j'ai acquis une certaine expérience, puisque depuis 1979, j'ai maintenant rencontré entre 50 et 55 serial killers sur tous les continents de la planète. Et certains de ces entretiens se déroulent parfois jusqu'à plusieurs centaines d'heures avec le même individu. Pour les besoins de cette nouvelle édition de l'Almanach du crime et des faits divers à paraître chez Edith, j'ai décidé de vous présenter un certain nombre d'extraits d'entretiens avec des tueurs en série. Et ces 3 extraits que vous allez voir ont été filmés en 1989 et 1990 dans différentes prisons américaines. La première prison est celle de Stark en Floride. C'est la prison où ont lieu toutes les exécutions capitales de l'État de Floride. À cette époque-là, c'était encore la chaise électrique jusqu'au milieu des années 90. Puis par la suite, ça a été l'injection létale qui est maintenant omniprésente aux États-Unis pour les exécutions capitales. Il ne reste plus qu'un seul État, celui de l'Utah, où vous pouvez choisir, si vous êtes condamné à mort, votre type d'exécution, si vous avez été condamné avant une certaine date. La seconde prison est celle de Vacaville, près de Sacramento, dans l'État de Californie, qui est d'ailleurs la prison la plus peuplée du monde occidental, puisqu'il y a plus de 10 000 détenus à l'heure actuelle dans cette prison. Gérard Schaeffer a cette particularité d'avoir été un policier au moment où il a commis les 34 crimes dont on l'a soupçonné. Il n'a jamais avoué ses meurtres, comme vous allez pouvoir le constater dans cet entretien. Et à la limite, on peut donc considérer que le questionnement que je fais avec lui est un échec, puisqu'il nie avoir commis ces crimes. Et comme j'ai constaté tout de suite, dès le début de l'entretien, qu'il était extrêmement arrogant, très égocentrique, très donneur de leçons, je l'ai abordé avec une tactique assez spécifique. Je me suis dit, je ne vais jamais réussir à le bouger. Il est trop ancré dans ses certitudes, trop sûr de lui, donc je vais la jouer le jeune homme très naïf qui vient de France, qui vient rencontrer ce professeur, entre guillemets, qui côtoie tous les grands tueurs en série, parce que dans la prison de Stark, à ce moment-là, quand je le rencontre, il y a près d'une trentaine de tueurs en série qui sont ses voisins de cellule. Donc j'ai abordé comme tactique de l'interroger de manière indirecte, de le faire parler à la troisième personne de tous les célèbres tueurs en série qu'il fréquentait dans cette prison de Floride. Je lui posais des questions du type Gérard Schaeffer, toi qui as côtoyé Ted Bundy, qu'est-ce que tu penses que Ted Bundy aurait fait pour amadouer des jeunes filles, pour les obliger à monter en autostop dans leur véhicule? Comment il aurait fait pour les emmener dans la forêt? Qu'est-ce qu'il aurait fait pour les tuer, etc. Et comme je savais que les crimes de Schaeffer ressemblaient beaucoup à ceux de Ted Bundy, petit à petit, quand il m'expliquait la façon d'agir de tel ou tel tueur en série, C'était ses propres fantasmes qui finissaient par remonter à la surface. Et vous allez le constater de manière assez frappante. À la fin de l'entretien, il se laisse totalement happer par ses propres fantasmes et on voit véritablement une transformation physique du personnage. Ses yeux deviennent plus intenses, les traits de son visage sont beaucoup plus prononcés, il est beaucoup moins souriant. Et à ce moment-là, d'ailleurs, j'avais établi, avant l'entretien avec mon caméraman, un code gestuel. C'est-à-dire que si j'écartais les doigts de telle manière pendant l'entretien, ça voulait dire « fais-moi un gros plan du visage ». Un autre geste indiquait de manière codée qu'il devait faire un gros plan, par exemple, sur les mains, ou un plan plus large, parce qu'évidemment, quand vous êtes pris par l'entretien, vous n'avez pas le temps de vous occuper de la technique ou d'interrompre l'entretien pour demander au caméraman d'agir de telle ou telle manière. Et vous allez voir notamment ce gros plan sur le visage de Schaeffer qui parle de manière frappante. J'insiste beaucoup là-dessus. Ce qui m'a aussi extrêmement déstabilisé et frappé pendant l'entretien avec Schaeffer et que je n'ai jamais ressenti avec aucun autre tueur en série, c'est que dès l'instant où je me suis retrouvé face à lui, j'ai eu l'impression de me retrouver face au mal avec un M majuscule. Pourtant, il est tout à fait charmant et souriant, comme vous allez le voir au début de l'entretien, mais j'ai eu la colonne vertébrale qui s'est coincée, j'ai eu les poils partout qui se sont hérissés sur mon corps, et à la fin de la première journée d'entretien, j'ai demandé aussi à mon ami Olivier Raffet ce qu'il avait ressenti. C'était lui qui réalisait et filmait l'entretien, et lui-même m'a dit qu'il avait été complètement déstabilisé, qu'il avait ressenti cette aura maléfique également. Je n'ai jamais ressenti une telle impression avec aucun autre des 50 et quelques tueurs en série que j'ai rencontrés. Et même à revoir maintenant les images, lorsque je fais par exemple mes cours auprès de la gendarmerie, j'ai toujours cette impression physique qui me revient et que je ne parviens pas à expliquer. Gérard Schaeffer avait un mode opératoire qui lui était propre. Il utilisait ses fonctions de shérif adjoint en Floride avec sa voiture de service pour prendre des autostoppeuses, pour les mettre en garde sur les dangers de l'autostop. Il les raccompagnait chez elles, se faisait donner de par sa fonction les numéros de téléphone, puis par la suite recontactait ces jeunes filles et leur proposait de les accompagner, de leur faire visiter tel ou tel coin des marais de Floride. À ce moment-là, comme il était un fan de bondage, il ligotait ses victimes avec des nœuds assez élaborés, les pendait à des branches d'arbres, de façon à ce que les pieds, les doigts de pied, touchent à peine le sol, et que de temps en temps, au bout de quelques heures, elle soit obligée quasiment de se pendre elle-même. Au bout d'un certain temps, il les détachait avant qu'elles aient péri, et il les obligeait à boire de l'alcool pour par la suite les photographier pendant qu'elles urinaient et déféquaient. C'était un de ses fantasmes. Puis après, les pendait à nouveau, et il terminait par la strangulation, qui était véritablement une obsession chez lui. D'ailleurs, pendant les entretiens avec lui, quelquefois il griffonnait sur un bout de papier, et c'était toujours des images de jeunes filles pendues ou attachées, nues, qu'il dessinait devant moi. Par la suite, il se fait prendre pour tentative de kidnapping de 2 jeunes filles. Parce que pendant qu'il les attache et qu'il les ligote dans une forêt des marais de Floride, il est appelé en service. Donc il retourne auprès du bureau du shérif pour lequel il travaillait, en laissant ces 2 victimes, pensant revenir les achever par la suite. Mais elles parviennent à défaire leurs liens, à donner l'alarme, et elles avaient retenu une partie du numéro de la plaque d'immatriculation du véhicule de Schaeffer. Il est arrêté. Une fouille à son domicile permet de retrouver des objets, papiers d'identité, cheveux, dents et écrits ayant appartenu à plus d'une trentaine de jeunes filles qui avaient disparu et dont on n'a jamais retrouvé aucun des corps. Par la suite, il a prétendu que ces écrits, qui ont été publiés d'ailleurs, ils ont fait l'objet d'une publication en France, Journal d'un tueur, en anglais c'est Killer Fiction and Beyond Killer Fiction, qui sont des écrits absolument abominables où Schaeffer exprime ses fantasmes nécrologiques et nécrophiliques, de décapitation aussi. Il raconte que le tueur qui est dans ces nouvelles de pseudo-fiction décapitait les victimes et gardait les têtes coupées dans un coffre. Par la suite, on a retrouvé des courriers qu'il a adressés à son ex-fiancée, qui par la suite a publié ses écrits, qui s'appelle Sandra London, où il disait qu'effectivement il coupait la tête de ses victimes. Mais il a toujours nié avoir commis ces crimes, et depuis cet entretien avec lui, il a été assassiné en prison par un autre tueur de près d'une trentaine de coups de couteau suite à la dispute autour d'une tasse de café.
Mr. Schaeffer, how long have you been imprisoned?
Since 1973.
And what are you accused of?
Well, do you mean what am I convicted of or what am I accused of? I'm accused of a lot more than I'm convicted of.
I know what, first, what are you accused of?
Well, I was accused of, originally accused of killing 34 women, but nobody has ever managed to come up with 34 names, jurisdictions, or anything else. It's a false accusation.
And what is your conviction?
I was convicted of killing 2 in Fort Pierce. I was never shown to be at the crime scene. There was never any link between me and the people that were killed, except the testimony of the mother of one of them.
Why do you sometimes supposedly called or been in touch with some newspaper telling them that you're the biggest killer of women in this century?
Who is that? That's what Robert Stone says. That's not a secret. That's on the front page of the Palm Beach Post newspaper on May the 13th, 1973. The Sunday paper, and that's what it says. That's not what I say, that's what Robert Stone said, and that's what the Palm Beach Post said. So if I say that, that's just parroting what they've said. I denied it, I have always denied it. But I'm not going to sit down here and say that I've never been accused of it. Robert Stone said that I was the #1 killer of women in this century. It's bullshit, he's a liar. You're a liar, Robert Stone.
And when did you start writing fiction?
Oh, you want to hear about the book? In 1963. I've been a writer since '63, published since '63 in fiction.
What was your intent in writing killer fiction?
Well, killer fiction, the intent. Well, when you watch television in today's world, there are all of these shows that show violence and sex, and they glamorize the criminal life, so to speak. Like the Ted Bundy, they've glamorized Ted Bundy and Henry Lucas, who you'll be speaking with, Otis Toole. And these people are not to be glamorized. What they do is a very, very horrible thing, and I felt that if I wrote a book that portrayed what the reality of serial murder was, as opposed to the glamorization of it that people in the public see on television, that maybe somebody would be shocked enough to say that these people should not be glamorized. They should be condemned for what they're doing. Like Otis Toole, he markets a barbecue sauce. He is a human cannibal. He killed people, cut them up, and ate them, and prepared a barbecue sauce, his own recipe, and put the barbecue sauce on them and cooked them. And today he's marketing his barbecue sauce. You can buy it through Sandra London. Now, that is horror beyond belief to me. How can anybody do something like that? But yet when you meet Toole, you'll see he's kind of an affable guy and he's full of smiles. And yet he's probably one of the most dangerous people on the face of the earth if you get on the wrong side of him. So Killer Fiction, having met many of these people, having met Bundy, and he's just the most famous one, but there's many other ones, and listening to these people talk to me just as we're talking, sort of like peers, and hearing the stories that they had to tell, I said, I ought to put these into a book format, into an anthology, and fictionalize them, and maybe I can get across the horror of what serial murder is all about.
But you think you've reached your goal as a writer?
A goal? No, it's not a goal. Killer Fiction is just one book. And Beyond Killer Fiction we had so many favorable responses that I decided to write Beyond Killer Fiction, because people were writing and say, wow, this is so terrible, this is so disgusting, can I get some more? And I said, wow, this is really weird. You know, people are writing and they like it, they want more, and they're saying this is horrible. It's like one girl wrote, she says, I was so scared I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Do you have another book coming out? I said, well, you know, what's going on here? But at a certain point with Beyond Killer Fiction, I decided that the prose was appealing to that was hitting the public in the wrong way. It was appealing to people who have a morbid curiosity in that side of human nature. And it was failing to achieve what I wanted it to achieve, which was to cause people to have insights as to what our society was doing with the sex and violence that's portrayed on television every day and being fed to the children. And they're being desensitized to how to relate to other people. They think that, bang, you get shot and you fall over and then you get up at the end of the show, you know, and that's not the way it really works. Everything, well, I shouldn't say everything, much of what you see on television shows man as a negative creature, where there's so many good things about man that could be on television, but they're not quite as interesting as the bad things. And I'd like to do something with my life, you know, that exemplifies the good as opposed to the bad. And I had hoped that Killer Fiction would have would be something that would be good. And it's kind of a mixed bag, actually. Some people say, yeah, it's really good. And then others say, it's really disgusting. And I say, yeah, you're right, it is. It's really disgusting. Does it make you want to hate murder? Or does it make you want to do murder? Because if it makes you want to hate murder, then it's working. Does it really horrify you? Are you a little more cautious about picking up that hitchhiker? You girls, are you a little more cautious about who you pick up in the singles bar and take home? Like Mr. Goodbar, right? Diane Keaton did that very well, but do you get my drift? What I was trying to inject an awareness into people through that? They see The Deliberate Stranger and they see it as entertainment. But Ted was real. He was real, man. He'd kill you and laugh. He enjoyed it. And I could sit there like when I'm sitting with you and talk about it. He relished it. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy, if only you could get his face on a camera when he's talking to me like this in the cage. They say.
Was he reliving all the time his murders?
Well, I wouldn't say all the time, but I took he told me that he had followed my case in the detective magazines, and that he had killed 2 girls in Washington as a copycat crime, so to speak, on the place in Jessup. And I think those were Ott and Naseland. And he would tell me that he took them up on the logging road and strangled them and had sex with their corpses and went back and had sex with their corpses and cut off their heads. Like, it's a tribute. And I'm thinking, you motherfuckers that wrote that. I said, here's the guy who read it, believed your bullshit, and went out and did something like this. And now, he's like bragging to me. It wasn't exactly a brag, it was like a tribute. How many did you get, really, Jerry? They said 34. Did they get all of them? Or do you have private graveyards? I said, Dad, I'm the best. What can I say to somebody like that, right? What can you say? You're left without any kind of rational response, because if you say, Ted, it's all bullshit, he's going to say, no, it's not. I know. And he knew, see, because he had lived it. And I hadn't lived it, except through what was written about me. And he was doing it based on what he had read. So he had 36. He wanted to be the best. And he was obsessed because they said I had 34. And he was afraid that I had ones that he didn't know about. See? And he was always trying to get me to say, no, that's all I got, 34, you know. But I never would say that. I discerned that he was concerned about the number. And it was my own way of needling him back by saying, I'm the best, Ted. You're going to fry, and I'm going to be here. And I'll be the best, just like they said. The number one. Mr. Stone had it all right. The best there ever was. And you're nothing. And he'd just go crazy. Can't be. And I'd take out my little thing from the Palm Beach Post. I said, read that, man. Cult. First page. Palm Beach Post. Cult. I'm the leader of the cult. There you go. Can't be. He was a sickie.
Edmund Emil Kemper, plus connu sous le nom de Ed Kemper, est un tueur en série extrêmement important dans l'histoire de la criminologie. Lorsqu'il est arrêté en 1972, c'est le premier tueur en série qui a été interrogé par ces fameux profileurs du FBI, quelques 7 ou 8 ans après sa condamnation. Et les entretiens avec Ed Kemper ont été tellement riches en matière de criminologie, de par son degré d'auto-analyse, que par la suite, ces fameux agents du FBI, Robert Ressler et John Douglas, qui dirigeaient cette unité de profileurs du FBI qu'on voit au début du film Le silence des agneaux, ont pu obtenir de l'État fédéral une subvention pour créer cette unité et mener des entretiens avec 35 autres tueurs en série et violeurs en série. Donc Kemper est très important de ce point de vue-là pour la connaissance qu'on acquit sur les tueurs en série. Tout d'abord, c'est aussi un monstre, entre guillemets, du point de vue physique. Il mesure 2,15 m, 160 kg. C'est le tueur en série aussi que j'ai rencontré le plus longuement, puisque depuis la fin des années 80, je l'ai rencontré pendant près de 500 heures. Il a un quotient intellectuel qui dépasse les 150, donc il fait partie de cette frange de gens ultra intelligents, qui sont à peu près 2% de la population. Il admet tout à fait franchement ses crimes, Mais en même temps, il est aussi extrêmement manipulateur. À certains moments, d'ailleurs, vous le verrez à la fin de l'entretien, lorsque je l'interroge sur le meurtre de sa mère, il ne supporte pas que je l'interrompe. Et il me rembarre assez sèchement. Vous le verrez, c'est tout à fait à la fin de l'entretien. À d'autres moments, vous verrez dans l'entretien, à un moment, on le voit qui se frotte les cheveux, qui paraît un peu interloqué. C'est parce que là, je venais de le faire pleurer. Comme c'est quelqu'un d'extrêmement bavard, qui ne supportait pas qu'on l'interrompe et tout, je m'étais rendu compte, malgré tout, qu'il avait un talon d'Achille. Dont j'ai profité pour reprendre le dessus dans les entretiens et pour le manipuler à mon tour. C'est qu'il ne supportait pas qu'on l'interroge sur les exactions qu'il avait commises à l'encontre de sa mère. Il se rend volontairement à la police, ce qui est extrêmement rare pour les tueurs en série, parce qu'il avait en quelque sorte terminé sa mission, entre guillemets, qui était de tuer sa mère, qu'il avait toujours haï et détesté. Et comme il l'explique à la fin de l'entretien, un jour du dimanche de Pâques, il décide d'aller massacrer sa mère à coups de marteau. Il l'égorge, il lui arrache le larynx. Symboliquement, ça représentait la voix qui lui donnait des ordres et qui ne supportait pas. Il lui arrache le larynx à main nue, le jette dans le broyeur du vide-ordure de l'évier, puis il pose la tête sur un manteau de cheminée et toute une nuit il s'en sert comme cible d'un jeu de fléchettes pour insulter la tête de sa mère, et le matin il viole le tronc décapité de sa mère. Mais à cette époque-là, Ed Kemper avait déjà tué une douzaine d'étudiantes. Il était nécrophile, parfois cannibale. Il m'a expliqué ainsi avoir préparé des ragoûts avec certaines parties des corps de ses victimes qu'il mélangeait à des spaghettis. Il a aussi le fait très intéressant d'avoir en quelque sorte le profil type du serial killer tel qu'on le connaît, avec des fantasmes macabres dès sa plus tendre enfance. Dès l'âge de 6-7 ans, il commet des actes de cruauté envers les animaux. Il va décapiter des chiens et des chats, leur couper les pattes, garder les corps momifiés dans des placards. Puis par la suite, quand il va s'attaquer à des êtres humains, il va répliquer ces actes de décapitation et de garder les corps qu'il commettait auprès des animaux. Quand il va déjà à l'école, à la petite école maternelle, à un moment, il a le fantasme d'aller embrasser la tête coupée de son institutrice. Il a 9 ans, je crois, lorsqu'il se rend avec un sabre de samouraï devant la maison de son institutrice, et il veut mettre en pratique cet acte et ce fantasme qu'il a en lui. Il en est empêché parce que quelqu'un arrive à ce moment-là pour se garer et rendre visite à l'institutrice. À l'âge de 14 ans, il tue ses grands-parents simplement pour voir ce que ça fait de tuer. À ce moment-là, il est interné dans une sorte d'établissement hôpital psychiatrique jusqu'à l'âge de 21 ans. Et comme il est extrêmement intelligent, pendant cet internement de 7 ans, il réussit à se faire nommer comme adjoint des psychiatres de l'établissement pour faire passer les tests aux nouveaux arrivants. Donc il apprend le jargon psychiatrique. Et à 21 ans, il connaît toutes les bonnes réponses et parvient à se faire libérer. Et comme il avait commis ses crimes en tant que mineur, on l'autorise à récupérer son dossier auprès des psychiatres à Fresno. Et il m'explique en souriant, et même ça le fait rire 18 ans après les faits, que quand il va garer son véhicule devant le bureau des psys de Fresno, il a déjà la tête coupée d'une victime dans le coffre de sa voiture. Lors des premières heures d'entretien avec Ed Kemper, il a essayé de m'intimider d'un point de vue physique. On était séparés par une table. Ça, vous ne le verrez pas à l'image, donc je me permets de vous le raconter. Quand je lui posais des questions qui ne lui plaisaient pas, Il rapprochait son visage du mien. Il appuyait assez fortement son nez contre le mien. Donc vous imaginez 2,15 m, moi je mesure 1,80 m. Il me regardait droit dans les yeux et avec sa voix un peu caverneuse, il me disait « Vous pourriez me répéter la question ?» Je vous avouerai que les premières fois où il faisait ça, je me sentais pas très bien, mais j'essayais de pas le montrer. Maintenant j'en souris, mais à l'époque c'était assez déstabilisant. À un moment donné dans l'entretien, vous verrez, il parle d'arrêter de tuer et de reprendre une vie normale avec sa fiancée. Il n'explique pas qui sa fiancée est. C'est tout simplement la fille du patron de la crime de Santa Cruz qui mène l'enquête sur ses propres meurtres à Kemper. Parce que son fantasme, c'était un jour de terminer toute sa série meurtrière en se rendant à dîner chez les parents de sa fiancée, donc des policiers, puis de massacrer toute la famille, de les décapiter et de poser les têtes coupées sur les assiettes pour que le lendemain, quand on s'aperçoive de l'absence du patron de la police, on se rende chez lui, qu'on découvre ce macabre tableau. Il se tenait également au courant des développements de l'enquête sur ses propres crimes en se rendant dans un bar, le Jury Room, qui était situé en face du commissariat de police de Santa Cruz, où il payait des tournées à boire aux policiers après leur service, et comme ça il se tenait au courant des développements de l'enquête. C'est donc quelqu'un d'extrêmement manipulateur, de très rusé, qui ne représente pas forcément le profil type du serial killer à son degré d'intelligence. La plupart des autres tueurs en série sont plutôt des marginaux ancrés dans la délinquance, qui sont rusés, manipulateurs, mais pas forcément très intelligents.
Could you tell us how long you've been in prison?
Excuse me. This month is 18 years that I've actually been in prison.
What were you convicted of?
8 counts of first-degree murder.
And what was your sentence?
7 years to life, CC, that's called concurrent. It means all the sentences run at the same time.
2 years before you committed the crimes, I think you traveled quite a lot on the freeways at night or picking up hitchhikers.
During the day.
During the day?
Yeah. I traveled a lot because I'd been locked up for 5.5 years. I had never had a license. Well, I'd just gotten a license when I got locked up the first time, a Montana license. And so I was free. The driving around was a way to exhibit that freedom, to demonstrate it, to get the cobwebs out of me. When I first got out, I loved to drive. I always did love as a kid to drive. I started driving when I was 10 or 12 years old, but I got a license when I was 15 up in Montana, and then I got locked up, and then here in California, and I got out, got a license, and I just started driving. And that was my main hobby, I'd say. And I saw a lot of people out hitchhiking, and I didn't select girls to pick up. I picked up anybody who wanted a ride. And over that whole 3-year period, it was the same way. If someone needed a ride, I picked them up, unless specifically I was looking for someone to do in. The crimes, it goes from May to September. 7th. May 7th, Sunday, to Thursday, September 14th. Then it hops over to January, right? And then to February. It's speeding up. It's coming to a head. It's getting to where, it wasn't a cyclical thing, but it was coming to where it was coming more often. And something I didn't tell a whole lot of people, I guess I did tell in one interview, shortly before it all ended, I drove up to the Bay Area, and I was living there. I was up in Alameda. But I was living with my mother in Santa Cruz and commuting because I had to work up there, and I stayed with a friend. I went out to Berkeley, and I drove Ashby Avenue, one of the places I used to drive, looking for co-eds. And I drove from Highway 80 up Ashby Avenue to Highway 13. The first 2 co-eds I killed were on Ashby Avenue. They were 5'2", slight of figure, you know, we call petite. And one's black hair, one's blonde hair, okay? I'm driving the opposite direction up Ashby Avenue. It's a year later. I'm seeing if I can maintain. I'm not hunting. I'm out seeing if I can maintain. I have a weapon in the car. I have everything else fitting the situation. I'm seeing if I can maintain. If I can just let go of it and maintain and marry this young lady and go on. I go driving up there, and here's these two young ladies, 5'2". One's got blonde hair, one's got black hair. They're in granny dresses, and I'm having shit fits because it's like deja vu. And oh my God, and I acted in a way that they wouldn't be paranoid because I'm a young man by myself in this car. I diffused the situation as I drove up. I'd gotten practice at that. All that driving around, it wasn't rehearsing. I made a game out of driving around, picking people up, and later on I discerned that some people wouldn't get in my car because of the situation. I'm a young man by myself. It's unsafe. So I thought, well, gee, that kind of put me off. I'm not doing anything to anybody, so I want to see if I can change that situation where they'll want to get in and I can take them where they're going. Because I know I'm not going to do anything. And I got to where I could diffuse that situation. It's how you're looking. If you look, oh boy, I already start cranking the car over there. They're not going to get in your car because they can see you from half a block away drooling. But if you look at your watch and say, geez, I don't know if I have enough time, and you're kind of in the mirror and looking around, and you pull over, this guy's just a businessman going somewhere, and get in his car, we'll go where we're going. And it's little games I played so they'd get in the car. And then we chatted, and I talked about things, and I found out where their orientations were and their little, what they used to judge and who could get in and who they could get in with and who they couldn't, right? In that sense, it's been interpreted as what do you call it, rehearsing. It's not true. It's like playing chess and then turning it into something ugly. I played chess casually. I played chess more and more thoroughly till I got very good at it, which was picking up people to where I could make you a bet. I can pick up those two ladies, and they'd say, oh man, you're crazy. Those are two very crafty young ladies who won't get in a car with a young man by himself, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd win the bet because I knew how to diffuse the situation. Even if they asked, where are you headed, right? And they had a sign saying where they're going, but they'd ask, or even if they didn't, they'd say, where are you headed? And I had ways of developing it to where they wouldn't get suspicious. But I didn't mean I was going to kill them. It meant I was playing a game. And then later, when I started killing people, I used that against them. But initially, it was just a hobby, it was a habit. It was trying to fill in the blanks of 5.5 years of not being in society. I missed that flower child generation. I missed the entry into Vietnam, all that stuff. And all these kids are like aliens to me. I say kids. I missed 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I'm supposed to be associating with people in their adult years. But I missed a big chunk, so I'm out there trying to fill in the gaps. Find out why these kids are the way they are now, because they were totally different from the kids that I was when I was that age, totally different. And I'm trying to fill the gaps in, and then later I changed that to something ugly. And why? My mother works at the university. My mother won't introduce me to any young ladies at the university because I'm like my father, and I don't deserve to know any of those young ladies. So here she is holding these little girls up there as too good for me. Very special. If anything, I was destroying icons. I was hurting her without her even knowing it. Again, it's that picayune, little petty, ineffectual, I'm getting back at you, but I don't have the heart to tell you what I'm doing. See? Why would I admit those things on a camera? That's embarrassing. It's humiliating.
And how would you select your victims? Were they...
I didn't select them. It was random. And it was also the development of the passion. If I was drove, they died. Like the last two victims. I was so pissed I'd have killed anybody that got in a car.
You said you had a lot of sympathy and empathy towards Marianne Péché when you talked to her. But isn't that strange to say that after you had killed her in such a brutal fashion?
There was a draw. There was a draw to the young lady. It was haunting. I'm not saying I had compassion toward her when I talked to her. I tried to remember what we talked about. In fact, I think what I said about her is that she epitomized what really drove me. She was a haughty young lady. She's kind of stuck up, distant. I look back on it and I see a girl that was not beautiful, she was not plain, she was somewhere in between, and she was caught up in that beauty thing, like kids in the valley are, okay? Valley girls, trying to make something of themselves and exploit little attributes they have and to downplay other ones. And she was playing Little Miss Distant with me. And her friend was very open and her roommate was very open and very country girl talking and stuff. And it's sad because the Pesh was the, Marianne was the expert at hitchhiking. She had been half her life in Europe. She'd hitchhiked around Europe. She'd done it in the United States. She was good at it. She didn't want to get in the car. The other girl, Anita Lucchesa, wasn't a hitchhiker. She'd been raised by her family, don't do things like that, that's totally out of line, and her friend talked her into it. And once she got into it and she saw how much fun it was, and they meet the different people and they talk with people, that by the time they're leaving Berkeley, right, it's all about who gets the front seat and who gets the back seat. So she opened the door and asked where I was headed. And it says Stanford right on the sign they were holding up. And I said, I'm going to Palo Alto, I can drop you off. Oh, great. And she jumps in, grabs her stuff, jumps in, opens the back seat up for her friend, who's standing there looking at me long and serious about whether or not, because I could tell at the time, she knows better than to get in. Single adult, it's a coupe instead of a four-door car, so she cannot get out other than through the front seat. So that's all the warning signs of not getting in with a single, in that kind of a situation. All of the things were wrong about it. But when I drove up, I pulled that little stunt of looking at my watch. Do I have time to pick them up? And you wouldn't believe how much effect that kind of thing has. And when she kept staring at me and looking for something wrong in my eyes, I gave this look back like, I don't understand. Why are you looking at me like this? I gave her that back, and she says, oh, this guy's a dork. He's innocent as hell. She gets in. Okay. We're driving along, and I'm looking at this young lady in the rearview mirror. And I look back at it years later, and I'm saying, she kept looking me back, too, right in the eyeballs. I'm wearing dark glasses, but they're not totally dark. And I'm realizing now that she could see me looking at her, and she was looking right back at me. And instead of saying something to me like, what are you looking at? Or, hey, maybe you ought to drop us off or something like that, she just kept looking back at me. And I'm looking at her, and she keeps looking at me. And I'm thinking she's playing this little game. It's not really teasing, so to speak. It's just this little psychological game back and forth that men and women do sometimes. The young girl in the front, Anita, was at one point in the driving, and I'm sure they were doing little looks at each other and little comments that I didn't pick up because I'm driving and looking for places to go. That somewhere in that communication, she gave me this sexy little look, like, oh boy, you're a pretty good-looking guy, da-da-da. And I smiled back at her. But not this hungry, yeah, I like to get down with you kind of thing. It was just I smiled back at her, and I saw it for what it was. It's an 18-year-old girl that's feeling her oats. She's not doing anything wrong. It's sad and it's real pathetic. But some of this stuff I was getting real caught up in this girl in the back seat. She was, to me, at that point, she was really beautiful. She had the most incredible blue eyes, right? She had this really shiny black hair that was turning me on. And I was getting drove because I just kept playing this game of picking people up, and I had plugged in those fantasies of killing people. And, the titillating little fantasies, and I says, geez, I keep walking away from that. And I put myself down as being weak for not being able to do something about that. Right? So I kept driving and driving on myself saying, I got to do something. I got to do something about this.
How were you feeling while you were killing?
Well, you said especially the first two, which were very messy. It was a shock that first time. That horrified me. I did everything stupid, everything wrong, if I were trying to get away with it. It was just really, really dumb. The knife I fell back on, that was a fallback position. I was trying to smother her. That didn't work. And she was struggling against that and arguing with me about it. And I got frustrated, and I reached in my pocket. I had that folding knife, and I pulled it out. And for a lot of years, and I made a point of saying back then with the investigators, when I pulled the knife out and locked it into place, it clicked. And she said, "What's that?" That's a quote. "What's that?" And she was kind of like a naggy kind of thing. "What's that?" And I couldn't figure out why she said that. Like, it's not that big an impact, a little clicking sound behind her, amongst what's going on, and it hadn't been murderous up to that point. It had been an aggravation, and I had her tied up or handcuffed. And it took me years for it to dawn on me, trying to look at it from different points of view to understand these things, why she said that. You know why she said that? Because I had brandished this gun. And I had cocked it once, and it clicked. So in her mind, very possibly, I had pulled the gun out and was going to shoot her. So she said, "What's that?" And thinking I've pulled the gun out now and I'm cocking it. Not realizing I'd pulled a knife out. I still had the gun in my pants. I stabbed her. She didn't fall dead. You're supposed to fall dead. You're supposed to go, oh, and fall dead. I've seen it in all the movies, right? Doesn't work that way. When you stab someone, they leak to death. They lose blood pressure, and you stab them more and more and more. You complicate it many times by where you're hitting, the pain you're causing, and the aggravation of the person involved, plus whether or not they leak a little faster. It wasn't working worth the damn. I stabbed her all over her back, and she even turned around. I stabbed her in the side and in the stomach once. Why? As she turned around, I could have stabbed her through the heart. But her breasts were there. And it actually deflected me. I couldn't see stabbing a young woman in her breast. That's embarrassing. I didn't say that to them back then, I don't think. I may have. But that's humiliating to admit that I was that affected by her presence. I stabbed her in the belly. That had to hurt worse. I didn't do it to make it hurt. I was trying to shut her up. And she ended up getting her throat cut. And I learned the term ear to ear, what that meant, because that's the way it went. And she went out of it completely right then. She lost consciousness and died probably just moments after that. But I just backed up out of the car. My hands are covered in blood, and I'm saying, oh God, I did it, I don't believe it, I did it, shit, I've done it. Now I got to kill the other one. And toward the end, when I picked those two girls up, and I said they were just like the first two, like Marianne Passion and Anita Luchessa, who'd haunted me all this time, and now two more just like them get in the car. We drive up 13, and we get to this figure 8 cloverleaf interchange where it hits 580, and they want to go under the freeway and back up on and head out this way. And out that way, I happen to know just a couple of miles down the road is Palomares Drive, where I took Anita Luchessa and Marianne Passion and killed them. Mills College is back this way, toward downtown. They don't think so. They want to go this way. I'm saying, gee, you don't want to go that way, and I can't tell them why. You do not want to go that way. Mills College is this way. Well, no, we go there, and we know where it's at. We live there, and we want to go. And as we're approaching this interchange, I'm saying, no, we need to go in the right lane, get up on the freeway and go downtown. You want to get in the left lane, go under, cross up, and that's going to be another step closer to you dying. Because even if I don't go all the way out to Palomares Road, up 580, if I stop where it starts to go out in the country and I get back on the freeway, that's where I used to work on the highways. That's one of the places where it's a cul-de-sac. You drive down there, it's a very quiet street, comes down up onto the freeway very sharply, and they're dead if these urges take over. And if I go that way, it's not encouraging me to stop. It's testing beyond where I want to test. We've already gone beyond that by them getting in the car because, geez, it's just like those first two. I was actually scared to death. I was going to kill them. And by that point, I had killed all of the co-eds. It was 2 months after the last two. And I'm seeing if I can pull out of it, like drinking or something or smoking. And at the point where we're bickering, if they'd started shrieking or banging on the windows, I'm busted. They're going to pull me over, someone's going to call a cop or something, and they're going to get me and probably bust me on these other cases on a fluke, and I'm trying to save their lives. I don't want them going that way because I know Mills College is this other way. They get scared shitless. And, oh my God, we shouldn't have gotten this guy's car, and they're getting all puckered up and I said, just bear with me, be patient. If I'm wrong, we'll get on the turnoff, we'll go right back around, we'll take you out your way. But I know it's the next turnoff or the one past it this way, downtown. Trust me, please. And they're sitting like this, and they quit talking to me, and they're looking straight ahead. And I'm saying, oh, shit. Guns under the seat, it's all just, whoa. I get up on the freeway, 2 turnoffs, Mills College. In fact, the next one said Mills College, next exit, But they're not relaxing or nothing. I had refused to take them the way they wanted to go and pushed it the other way. That's what scared them. But they didn't know the irony of it was if I'd have gone along their way, I'd have probably said, yeah, well, I'll just follow on through and oops, we'll do it one more time. How do you oops human lives? I don't know those 2 young ladies, and I don't know where they are today, and I don't know that they remember that little incident. But when I drove them to Mills College, inside of Mills College, to their college entrance, right to the building, to the dormitory, and they got out of that car and flew up those stairs. Never even looked back. I'll bet they quit hitchhiking quite so casually after that. But you know what? I don't think they know to this day how close that came. And the irony of it is, just to shut them up and not have them freak out, I could have gone the other way. But by that time, then we're going back up that groove of what I had done already and what I was familiar with. See what I'm saying? And that day, I knew I could not stop doing it. I knew I had no control over it. I had just minimal controls. But mainly, I could not stop it. It was going to happen again. And between that weekend day, it was a Saturday or a Sunday, I think it was a Sunday, between that Sunday and the next Saturday, all that week I was working, I built an image in my head: my mother's going to die. I'm going to kill her, and I am going to go to it with the police, and we're going to hold court in the street, and they're going to pound me in the ground, and they can fill in the blanks because I don't want to be around to explain it. All that week, it was a conviction that just got deeper and deeper in me. I got more and more morose. I got less and less talkative at work. I got more somber about what I was doing, because almost every minute of every day, I knew that's what that next weekend held. That was Easter weekend, right? Worked half a day Friday, went back to Santa Cruz Friday afternoon, was drinking Friday night, fell asleep before my mother came home, woke up after she came home. And the last words we had were an argument, right? I walked into her bedroom to chat with her. In the back of my mind, I'm not going to try and blame her for dying. I'm just saying, in the back of my mind, I was hoping she could say something, or I'd say something that could stop all of this shit. A little childish hope in the back of my mind that she'd say something and I'd play it off.
But you still went with a hammer.
Wait a minute. You're wiping out the moment here. I went in there hoping I could stop this stuff in the back of my head. I'm not planning on it. I'm just a little hope. And the first thing out of her mouth was, she's reading this book and she just flaps it down on herself and says, "Oh my God, I suppose now you want to stay up all night and talk." That was one of her favorite peeves, when I come in late at night and want to talk. And once in a long while, like that night, I spun on my heel and said, "Nope, good night," and walked back out. And she knew she'd hurt my feelings, and the next day we'd sit down and talk. Except I knew that we weren't going to talk. And I went back in my room and I laid down. I did not go to sleep. I laid there for 3 hours, 4 hours, till 4 or 5 in the morning, a little after 5 in the morning, and walked in there with a hammer and caved in the side of her head and cut her throat.
Otis Toole, qui est mort depuis du sida et de problèmes de foie à la prison de Stark où il était emprisonné, est un des tueurs les plus prolifiques de l'histoire du crime américain, puisqu'on lui reconnaît au moins une centaine de crimes commis dans tous les États du territoire américain. Il tuait généralement avec son compagnon et amant, Henry Lee Lucas, qui lui aussi est décédé maintenant d'une crise cardiaque dans une prison du Texas. Et leur odyssée sanglante a donné probablement un des films les plus réalistes et les plus intéressants de l'histoire du cinéma des serial killers, qui est le film de John McNaughton, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Otis Toole commet son premier crime à l'âge de 14 ans. Il a une enfance absolument atroce, puisque dès l'âge de 5 ans, il accompagne par exemple sa grand-mère, qui est une sataniste convaincue, pour aller déterrer des cadavres, pour fabriquer des potions à partir des morceaux de cadavres. Dès l'âge de 7-8 ans, il s'adonne à l'alcool de façon excessive. Dès l'âge de 9 ans, il se drogue, d'abord avec de la marijuana, puis des drogues de plus en plus dures. Il est violé par son père, puis, quand son père est décédé, par son beau-père. Il voue un attachement extrêmement fort à sa propre sœur, Drusilla, et il lui emprunte constamment des vêtements féminins. Et il adore se déguiser en femme. Ce sera d'ailleurs une des approches que je vais utiliser pour débuter l'entretien avec lui. Vous allez voir, cet entretien, ce début d'entretien avec lui démarre de façon assez atroce, mais c'est volontaire de ma part, parce que les agents du FBI et une amie proche d'Otis Toole m'avaient dit il y a deux choses pour le mettre en confiance. Lui parler du fait qu'il adore se déguiser en femme, qu'il adore allumer des incendies, et surtout il aime beaucoup parler du fait qu'il est un tueur cannibale. Donc je démarre l'entretien en lui parlant justement de cet amour pour le cannibalisme, en lui disant que j'ai goûté à sa recette de sauce cannibale qu'il m'avait transmise avant notre entretien. Et c'est vrai que cette accroche peut vous paraître quelque peu abrupte, mais vous le constaterez, il éclate de rire et à ce moment-là, j'ai gagné sa confiance et il me parle à ce moment-là en toute liberté de ses relations avec Henri Di Luca, des actes sordides qu'ils ont commis, des meurtres d'enfants et autres horreurs. D'un point de vue personnel aussi, cet entretien m'a marqué parce que Otis Toole est entre guillemets tombé amoureux de moi et il voulait absolument me donner sa bague de fiançailles qui lui avait été fabriquée par un autre détenu. Fort heureusement, j'ai réussi à l'en dissuader avant la fin de ces entretiens avec lui. Par la suite, il m'a adressé pas mal de dessins que vous verrez également, qui expriment un petit peu ses fantasmes morbides, sa fascination pour la mort, non seulement la mort des autres, mais sa propre mort, puisqu'à un moment donné, vous constaterez un dessin d'une pierre tombale qui porte son nom. She loves you a lot. Okay, I'm a friend of Sandra, as I told you, and she says I should tell you a special message, that I am your friend and I want you to be happy. Do you understand the message?
Yeah, I understand.
And Sandra actually sent me, while I was in France, your recipe for the barbecue sauce.
Oh.
And I must tell you that I tried it.
Was it any good?
Yeah, it was very good. Although I didn't try it on the same kind of meat that you did.
It's good on any kind of meat.
Yeah, on any kind, yes. I hear that you want to do a book of your recipes, of your cannibal recipes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
because somebody overseas, over there in Australia, they won $1,000 in a cooking contest.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it was. I got a news article. I got an article out of the paper. Just wrote a book on it, and Saunders started writing a book on me, but they said the book was too much in my favor, so they turned the book down. So I reckon she might end up selling it to Dr. Norris, or she might end up selling it to somebody. Or she might rewrite it again. I don't know what she's going to do. But as far as I'm concerned, she can go and write the book any kind of way she wants to write it. Because whatever you put in the book anyhow, people's going to believe what they want to believe anyhow, regardless if it's true or it isn't true. So it don't matter either way, you know. He's just stuck, so he just will face it. He just will kiss his ass goodbye and give his soul to God, or kiss the devil one. He's going to have to get his mind right, which way he wants to go.
And what kind of guy was Henry when you met him?
He was quiet to a certain extent. But you could never tell when he was up to something, you know. He was always quiet, you know. I even tried to running off before, you know, but no. My parents say, no, you can't run him off. We want him to stay around. So I tried to run him off, and so I couldn't run him off nowhere, you know. I really like fires. I like them like 3 stories high, though. Little bitty fires. They don't turn me on that much, you know. Big old fires turn me on, you know. Sometimes I can dream and I said, oh shit. I said, I wish I could see a fire about 4 or 5 stories high on top of these buildings where all shooting over the buildings. And I could be up there just getting off. I could really get off there, you know. But you can't do none of that around here, you know. Not unless you build a little bitty fire, you know. I ain't built no fire since I've been here. Over top of the buildings, you know. Really gets me off there. I like to do that in here, but ain't nothing to burn, you know. You see what it is. Nothing but concrete, you know. No wood, no nothing. All back there ain't nothing to burn, you know. Nothing but a mattress. It goes out in no time, imagine. You can't most of everything they got in here is fire resistant. It won't burn, you know. Not unless you get a whole pile of newspaper and pile it up. They have been some people do that here, you know. And I stick my head out the window and watch all the planes jumping outside the window, you know. I've seen people do it since I've been here, and I just be getting off. I'll really be getting off. You know. See all them planes shooting outside. I've seen him do it a lot since I've been here, you know. Oh, like he would. I didn't know what to think about it. My mind say so messed up all the time until I don't know what to think about it, you know. He had me going all kind of ways. I didn't know which way I wasn't going, which way I was coming or going, you know. So I don't really know. I was just he'd tell me to do a little bit of everything, you know. He was too much. And then he killed her and then had sex with her after she was dead. And then he seen this damn goat and he wanted to fuck this damn goat. I said, you something else. I said, you want to have sex with a goat? He had on a pair of boots. He took that billy goat's legs and put in his boots, and that billy goat just a bucket, and he just carried on with that goat. While he was having sex, that goat just a bucket, had the legs in the boots. I said, I ain't never seen nothing like this in my life. Here you all having sex with a goat now. You got her legs in your boots, and she can't get away, and she's just a bucket, and he's bucking with her at the same time, rocking back and forth, having sex with that goat. I ain't never seen a man so disgusted. It was too much. I don't know how I ever got tied up with that man.
How would you kill the people?
Most any kind of way. Not no one certain way, just most any kind of way. He was disgusting. I didn't know if he's going or coming half the time. He would, whoever cut, the new member cut the person's throat would fuck the person. And then let an animal fuck her too. And then they would fuck the animal too. And then they would kill the animal too afterwards. And they would have a big feast. They would cook the person and cook the animal. And they would have a big feast.
That was when you were in the cult of devil worshippers.
Oh yeah. They would do that. There were so many people, you know, you couldn't hardly tell who was who most of the time, because lots of times they would wear a mask or a hood or something over their head. But some of the members, you know who the members was, but you can't give up the main part of what the code is, you know, because it'd be more hell for you, worse than what it is. And so you can't get up with secret passwords. It's my crime. A long time ago, I was special in that crime, but they kind of came out in the book. Came out that I ain't number one suspect for that no more. At one time, they tried to say I done it, but they found out I didn't do it. So he came out in a book here a while back, in a book called Henry, you know. So and I talked to the lawyer, you know, and they said they know I wasn't down there at that time. They know I didn't do that crime. I mean, it was a big mess about that crime, you know, but it wasn't my crime. See, if somebody writes to you, and it's sending the money, you know, they have to put your prison number on there too. Don't they turn around and send it back.
Les tueurs en série ont toujours existé, donc ce n'est pas un phénomène nouveau, mais est-ce qu'il est en augmentation depuis quelque temps? C'est difficile à dire, parce qu'on peut se dire que les médias en parlent plus, parce que le sujet, depuis le succès planétaire du Silence des agneaux en 91, est à la mode, et aussi les progrès de la police technique et scientifique évoluent. On a maintenant les fichiers d'empreintes génétiques, les bases de données comme le VICLAS au Canada ou le SALVAC en France, qui permettent maintenant de mieux recouper des crimes qui pouvaient paraître isolés par le passé. Mais de toute manière, je pense que ce phénomène est en augmentation dans tous les pays du monde. En France également, depuis 1999, on a eu un peu plus de 60 tueurs en série, emprisonnés, identifiés, mis en examen ou jugés. Et pour leur nombre de victimes, ça représente pour les tueurs multirécidivistes en France déjà le chiffre plancher de 12% des homicides commis sur notre territoire, alors que jusqu'à présent, on a toujours prétendu que c'était un phénomène anglo-saxon. Et vous le verrez d'ailleurs dans cette nouvelle édition de l'Almanach du crime et des faits divers, puisque j'aborde le portrait de plusieurs tueurs en série français.